begin with Professor Sadgopan. Can you tell us about, share some of your thoughts on the growth story of the of the internet in India?
Okay, so as a person who's kind of, we were part of the IIT system where we internet started. And we used to joke that the project was called Internet. And some of you remember there used to be a programming language where you declare the variable at the beginning, right? And for int, you say integer, right? For integer, you say int. So int, ERNet, is internet. Okay, that's how we started, right? So we've been doing the internet for long, but I think what is important is that it has been slow, but it is happening much faster. So I want you to observe three things very special about 2016, in addition to you completing what, 17 years or 18 years now?
18 years.
18 years of Akamai. And at the beginning of the year, we crossed 1 billion mobile phone connections. It does not reach 1 billion Indians. Okay, many of us have two connections, right? So somewhere around 400 million, 500 million people have access to mobile phone. Second thing was that something called UID authority, you might have heard of Aadhaar, a unique ID for every Indian. We crossed 1 billion, again in 2016. And more interesting stuff, happens to be another son of a professor. It's not only that we generally think professors can't do much, they can only talk. Of course, he is the solitary exceptions. We also think professors' sons also can't do much. There is a solitary exception. His name is Naveen Tiwari. His father used to be a professor of electrical engineering at IIT Kanpur. And he runs a company called InMobi. And it actually touched billion devices. So all things happened in 2016. So I am an incorrigibly optimistic guy. So I think 2016 will be a year where internet will really kind of blow up in India. And you guys are there, the startup guys. You will create amazing companies. And then next year when Tom is again here, he'll have more interesting stories to be told through your story. Thank you.
Thanks, thank you, thank you. Let's jump now to the other side of the panel. Piramal, let me ask you about the next phase of growth for India. Where are these 400, 500 million internet users going to come from? And what's the world going to look like when all these X 100 billion users come online?
Sure. And actually, that's a lot of what the book talks about. It actually provides a very unique perspective. So actually, the origin is a report that we publish at Akamai every quarter called the State of the Internet Report. And that provides what I think is a very unique view into sort of, the state of how things are on the internet along the lines of some of the key metrics that we track, performance, availability, attacks, latency, broadband adoption, penetration, et cetera, by country, by ISP, et cetera. And I think it's through the partnership between NASCOM, YourStory, and Akamai that we said, how do we take our retrospective view and then try to figure out what the future holds, taking into account some of the trends that we're seeing in India. And if you look at where we are today, you hear projections, whether it's from the government, from the authorities, from the telcos, from the content providers, people who run the distribution business. It is not unlikely, or it is highly likely, let me put it that way, that we'll see accelerated adoption of mobile broadband, especially as 4G services get launched in the next few years and get wide adoption. That we go from a couple hundred million that's talked about today. Now that's all internet connections, not 4G or 3G, but the next 400. And to answer your question on the next 400, I think you're obviously going to see much deeper penetration in the metros. That's one thing we can bet on. And I think if you see today's penetration or adoption, it's really the metros. But if you talk to folks that I just mentioned, they're looking at the tier 2, tier 3 cities. They're looking at sectors of the market or parts of the country where access is still pretty weak, where you haven't laid out broadband fiber. Could LTE serve as a way to get to the last person possible and provide them a broadband connection? So I think that's really where I think the next couple 100 million people are going to come from. And that to us is a huge challenge. I think it's a genuine challenge. How do you provide a high quality experience to every single user at scale? But more importantly, in the Indian context, with the right economics. And those are the kinds of problems that we love to solve. Tom's super excited about it, and something that we're thinking about: what role can we play to provide access or be an enabler in this process where we can help not only obviously provide quality and scalability, but also help bring down the economics or make the economics more viable for the Indian market, so that when it comes to services like commerce, like financial services, like government services that are now enabled increasingly online, obviously the consumption of video and content and entertainment, how can we help bring all those services to those 400 million people? Because to sum it up, in my view, India is not a demand problem. It is really a supply problem, right? Once you have access, once you have content, people are ready to consume. So that's a bit of a view on where we think things are headed.
Got it. So the topic of startups has come up many times. So let me ask Tom now, what are some ways in which Akamai globally is engaging with the startup ecosystem? How do you spot good technology, good startups? How do you engage them, maybe invest or acquire them? How does the word startup fit in your radar?
Yeah, there's a variety of ways. We work with incubator groups in multiple cities around the world, providing some support and advice. We invest in startups. It's a relatively small scale program. There's probably a dozen that we're invested in now. Early stage, think of, $500,000, maybe $2 million investment in startups. And these would be companies that are close to us in space, but not too close. So it wouldn't be competitive, but maybe something that, we want to keep track of the space. Maybe someday we'd acquire the company, and so that we'd have an early stage investment. And we provide free services to startups with a program actually started here in Bangalore with Akamai One. And Siddharth, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, so as Tom rightly mentioned, definitely we want to engage with the startup ecosystem. And as you mentioned, there are 9 or 10 unicorns in India which are valued more than $1 billion. And given the talent available, given the ecosystem which is playing out right now here in India as well as in Bangalore, we believe that there is a lot of potential to create more unicorns. And to ensure these startups, they compete in a very, very, I would say, confident manner with the big names in their space, wherever they are looking at to start their companies. Akamai India started a program called Akamai One, where we encourage startups to basically adopt Akamai technologies for them to compete with the big giants in any space. And today, we have roughly around 78 startups who are part of this program. And recently, we took this program at a global level. So there are companies from Europe as well as some other parts of Asia, in Korea. They are also part of this program. And if somebody is interested in this group, we can share more details. And this program is being managed and dispensed out of our Akamai Bangalore office. And we would love to see more unicorns coming out of Bangalore, maybe hundreds of them. Maybe the next Facebook, next WhatsApp should be coming out from Bangalore.
And Graham, maybe you would care to extend this discussion to the broader Asian context. I know you handle the Asia-Pac region for Akamai. So how is the startup scene in India comparing to maybe other parts of Asia, like China perhaps, or Southeast Asia?
Sure, certainly. Essentially across Asia there are a number of pockets of innovation and startups, but for me, as we look across the whole region, the 3 that spring to mind are India, China and Australia. All of them have a number of different things that converge, and I think generally India is probably better placed to outpace both of those over time. One is good infrastructure, good government support or rule of law. Certainly Australia and India both have that. The other one is good education systems and the ability for people who are coming out of education to get access to funds. Australia, India and China all have that. I think when you lay on top of that the amount of really good educational facilities that are around existing tech hubs, like here in Bangalore, for example, and Chennai and Hyderabad, other places where the government's really got behind the combining of education with industry. And then I think there's a natural resilience and desire to change things in India that comes from some of the infrastructure challenges that you've had historically. We all look at the traffic in Bangalore, and people, while they're sitting in cabs or going to and from work, are thinking about ways to make things easier from a commerce point of view or from access to goods and services. So I really do think here in India, there's a real convergence of all the things you need to develop a hotbed of the new technologies and the next big things. Everyone talks a lot about China, and recently we heard about a company called Didi that took Uber out of China, etc. I think India's got the potential to do that and is catching up very, very fast.
A couple of questions from the previous sessions apply also to you, Professor, which is what's happening now to make it easier for students in India to get into the startup ecosystem? How is IIITB, for example, engaging companies like the SAPs and the Akamais of the world? So some advice for our youngsters here.
Okay. I'll share something which is very social. This is important, right? We're all human beings. We are not robots. I would say between 95 and about 2008, 9, 10. Okay. The big problem was people wanted to start. But because I'm very close to students, so they come and share many things. So the boy or the girl would whisper in my ears, "Sir, I really want to start. But if I tell my fiancée that I'm going to work for IBM, she says, fine. If I'm going to start up, she said, maybe I will look at other options." Right? So what happens is, it is important, right? When you're a youngster, when you're 20s, it is also important to have able to get dates. If you don't get a date, if you work for a startup, so luckily today, it is exactly opposite. They come and tell me, if I work for IBM, such boring company, forget it. Startup, cool. Okay? So things are changing. Okay? That's important from their side. Second thing is, incubation has been around for 10 years. And initially, we're all putting emphasis in the wrong things, right? We'll give you a table, we'll give you internet, we'll give you a computer, etc. But all these things are completely irrelevant today, particularly mobile and cloud, right? You can work from anywhere. In fact, in Bangalore, the best places where actually startup happening is actually coffee shops in Kormangla and HSR layout, right? It's not in any incubator, okay? But interesting stuff is, because it has become so common, so we have now generations of senior folks who have become entrepreneurial. So a lot of actual learning happens through the senior students who have turned entrepreneurs. Last but not the least, there is so much funding available. In fact, we can fund up to 25 lakhs. So in a sense, you don't have to go to VC. The institutions can fund companies directly. Okay? So what happened? Access to fund, access to talent, access to people, and the fact that you can work from anywhere. And last but not the least, socially acceptable. So I think all these things have contributed, changed a lot in the last 10 years. If you can't start up now, forget it, you will never start.
Okay, I have one more question for the panel, and then once again I'll ask you to jump in with your comments. My question for you is has to do with the Olympics. How many of you were up last night watching badminton and wrestling and all those things? How many of you saw gymnastics, for example, on Independence Day Eve, etc.? That's good. So this obviously is one of the most watched incidents around the world, and what's going to happen next Olympics? What's going to happen when the Japan Olympics kicks around? How different is the internet going to be? How different is education going to be? How different are you guys going to be in 4 years down the road? Let's start with Tom. What's going to happen with Olympics on the internet?
I think there'll be things that happen there that we don't even imagine now. The landscape is moving so quickly. At the very least, it'll be broadcast in 4K, probably even 8K. To some folks coming out of Tokyo. There'll be the amount of bandwidth consumed will be enormous. It'll be orders of magnitude bigger than we're doing now, which was orders of magnitude bigger than 4 years ago. Paramel, what's your perspective on what'll happen in 2020?
Well, I hope there's a lot of bandwidth and a lot of consumption.
Yeah.
But if past history is any indicator of where the future is headed, at least in the context of media, I'd say just today, while I can't discuss some numbers publicly, but on our platform, we're seeing already we're pushing 4.5 to 5 times more traffic just in these Olympics than we did in the previous Olympics. Just Sochi was 2 years ago. We're serving 3 times more traffic. So you project that out 4 years, more people coming online, more people watching it on multiple devices all the time at high bit rates. That is going to grow exponentially. I have no doubt about it. I also have no doubt that we're going to be watching live action or catch-up action any way we want. Sharing it in more interesting ways than we probably are today. All those trends are probably going to expand exponentially. The one interesting point that I want to add, I read a tidbit. The hockey team in the US apparently uses some sort of a device to track how tired the player is. And based on that data that the coach is getting every minute, they can make decisions on when to send a backup player or make a switch. Now imagine that, it's a simple example of an IoT use case, and I know, a lot of our customers and prospects that we speak in Japan are thinking already about how technologies like that can be embedded into their planning for the games. But think about that as a simple example, right? I know skiers do that, I think the possibilities are endless, not only from a point of view of consumption, of content, but also how IoT and many of such interesting technologies become so deeply ingrained and embedded in how we prepare and then play our sports.
Siddharth, crystal gazing.
Tokyo Olympics, actually, I want India to at least win 20 medals to start off. But I agree with Parimal. I think the opportunities are enormous there. And I believe the Tokyo Olympics would be the most advanced, technologically assisted Olympics in terms of the delivery. That's what I believe will happen. And I hope most of you guys would be watching it on internet, which would be powered by Akamais. So.
What we've learned about the Olympics over the last 3 or 4 Olympics, winter and summer, is that they break all records. We can't anticipate how big the traffic will be. And as Parimal said, last night we broke another record. I expect that will change in 2 days when PV Sindel wins the gold medal, right? It'll go again. In Japan, though, we've been talking to NHK, the lead broadcaster, for the last 2 years, so they've been thinking about it for 6 years. I think what you'll see is a convergence of some really interesting technologies, not only the internet and mobile technology, but robotics as well. And in Japan, when you talk to the government or the broadcaster, they talk about Olympics everywhere. So I'm envisaging robots greeting people at airports and in subway stations and things like that. So there'll be a bit of convergence there. But we do know that traffic records will be broken. And as Siddharth said, when India win those 20 medals, things will go into spiking here as well.
Actually, funny story, already CNN and CBS are using bots to provide live tweets. They're not human written, they're just written by bots. So I think, honestly, I don't know what's going to come out beyond what we can think of right now, but I'm super excited.
Professor.
One is wait until 4 years, but my own feeling is, soon after the games are over, there may even be an opportunity of some of you actually getting access to the full data and do some amazing analytics, and there will be enough buyers. Because this kind of a facility was not available even 4 years back. The amount
Open
of
data
data
kind of
which you have about this one and ability to create some amazing analytics, visualization, etc. You would have already seen there is a very nice thing that was done by one guy in Hindustan Times a couple of days back. Just amazing, just about running. So that is one. Second thing is, I think for the Bangalore crowd, I think we are still watching games almost like the way I watched it maybe 40 years back. In a sense, couch potato, right? Sitting on, we are not really we are still not immersive, right? We are just consuming. The chances are you might be in a position to even be able to watch it in a participative way. VR will become more real. There will be, I don't know whether it is Google goggles or any other part, some other ways, and who knows that you might actually be able to get onto somebody's Google Gear over the internet and be able to watch as if you were there. So these kind of possibilities exist, and what it also means is this 4 years is a great window for Bangalore startups to actually go, not only win 20 medals, and actually create amazing new possibilities of consuming information in a participative way than simple couch potato consumption way.
That's a fantastic note on which to end this panel. A round of applause, please, for a fantastic round of speakers.